indeed an honor to be introduced by my predecessor in the House of Delegates, and to know that I have the support of her predecessor in the House of Delegates, Jean Cunningham, both of whom have been strong supporters from the moment I announced in 2005 for public office for the first time. I grew up in this district, 30 miles down the road, on the border of Ettrick and Matoaca. I grew up listening to the stories of my parents, educators at Virginia State University, talking about how they saw the best of government through the New Deal as children, and they saw the worst of government through Jim Crow. They dedicated their lives to public service through the community service, the church, their sorority and fraternity, and they instilled in my sisters and I and a knowledge that we had a duty to be servant leaders somehow. And listening to their stories, I understood that my calling was to make government a force for helping people and solving problems. And that's what motivated me to run for the House of Delegates 17 years ago. On the same day, Donald McEachin was elected to his second term in the General Assembly. And we worked together, serving the Metro Richmond area, fighting for voting rights, equal rights, reproductive rights, climate action before it was cool, affordable housing, and access to health care, just to name a few issues. When he moved over to the Senate, we partnered together on a number of issues. And when he got elected to Congress, he encouraged me to succeed him. And again, we worked together, and I carried on a legacy that he reminded me went back to J. Sergeant Reynolds, Doug Wilder, Benny Lambert, and him. He said, "You have big shoes to fill." And I said, "I know." I reminded him he had big shoes to fill as well, taking on the legacy of John Mercer Langston, the first African American to represent Virginia in the 4th District. He served that legacy well up until his final days. The last conversation we had was about protecting reproductive rights. This is a bittersweet day for me as I continue to mourn a friend, but hear the call to carry on his legacy and carry my servant leadership to Washington. I've spent 17 years here in this building, passing over 350 pieces of legislation, many of those in the minority party. Virginia made history, and I carried legislation to make us the first state in the South to proactively protect reproductive rights. Yes. To have 100% clean energy standard to address climate change. The first state in the South to extend worker protections of any kind to domestic workers. The first state in the South to have its own Voting Rights Act. Yes. And while I'm proud of all of these, that Voting Rights Act is probably the one I'm the proudest of. Because in 1901, my great-grandfather had to take a literacy test and found 3 white men to vouch for him just to be able to register to vote. But my great-grandmother couldn't. My father and my grandfather paid poll taxes to be able to vote. My grandmother never voted, passing away at the young age of 32. My mother voted for the first time after the Voting Rights Act in 1965. She would be here today if she could. I know she is watching. Say hi, Mom. She is 90 years old and couldn't make the trip, but we will make sure we get her to the polls next Tuesday so that she can vote for her daughter to be your next representative, your next servant leader in the 4th Congressional District. I am ready to go. It is our time. Let's go do this. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
Can I ask you about the decision by the
I think given the time frame put in place by the governor calling the special on February 21st left them little choice. I think mobilizing voters in less than a week would have been even more undemocratic. And so we wanted to make sure, they wanted to make sure that as many people as possible could get the word and get out. And unfortunately, with a nominee having to be in place by December 23rd, they didn't really have much choice. If anyone knows how to multitask, it's a working mom.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you hope to do if you are elected? I mean, obviously you mentioned some of the things that McEachin's done. What are your top priorities?
My top priorities will remain what they have been here, in that first, just helping people, serving the people of the 4th District, carrying my very strong constituent services record to Congress and to the 4th District. On issues, voting rights, reproductive health, addressing climate change are all top priorities for me, will remain top priorities for me. But bottom line, I am going to help the people of the 4th District and beyond, and to help them understand that government is supposed to help them and solve their problems. All right, well.
What do you think is the biggest thing that's just going to distinguish you from your opponent or opponents in this fight?
I have a 17-year record of servant leadership to the people of Metro Richmond. Legislatively, constituent service-wise, I bring a new perspective, and will bring a new perspective as the first Black woman elected to Congress from Virginia, the perspective of a working mother of children in public schools. And just as I brought that perspective and passed major legislation and made a huge difference in a lot of lives, here I'm going to be able to do that in Congress as well, better than any other candidate. Well, thank you all for coming, and Tuesday we'll let you know when and where to show up. Let's go do this.
Let's go.